All right, let's dive into something that every single one of us struggles with, motivation. Today, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty neuroscience of it. We're going to unpack how you can actually start to rewire your brain for some serious productivity, all by understanding this one tiny, powerful molecule, dopamine. So let's just start with a question that I'm sure hits home for a lot of you. Why is it that you can get lost in a video game or just scrolling through social media for like 3 hours straight, but the thought of sitting down to study or work for just 30 minutes feels like climbing Mount Everest? You know, logically, which one is better for you in the long run? But your brain just keeps pulling you in the other direction. And this slide really just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the hard stuff, the low dopamine tasks that actually build your future. And on the other, you have all the easy, high dopamine activities that give you that instant hit of gratification. You know, the central challenge of our modern lives is that our brains are constantly being hijacked by the stuff on the right, which makes it so much harder to focus on the left. And it all comes down to one chemical. Okay, so let's get one major thing straight. Most people call dopamine the pleasure molecule, but that's not quite right. It's way more accurate to call it the motivation molecule. See, dopamine isn't really about the feeling of pleasure you get after you do something. It's the powerful chemical that creates the desire for the reward and gives you the drive to go get it. So just how powerful is this desire? Well, you gotta hear about this classic neuroscience experiment. Researchers hooked up a rat so that every time it pressed a lever, it got a direct jolt of stimulation to its brain's reward center. What happened was intense. The rats developed this insane craving, pressing that lever hundreds, even thousands of times. They completely ignored food, water, even sleep. They just kept pressing it until they literally collapsed from exhaustion. That's the raw, unfiltered power of dopamine. But then they flipped the script. When the scientists blocked the release of dopamine in the rats' brains, they became completely lifeless. They lost all will to live. They wouldn't eat or drink, even with food and water right there in front of them. They had zero motivation for even the most basic acts of survival. So the takeaway here is absolutely critical. No dopamine, no motivation, period. Okay, so this brings us to the core problem that we're all up against in this crazy, high-stimulation world we live in. It's something called the homeostasis trap, and it explains exactly why those important, but maybe boring, tasks just seem to get harder and harder over time.
The best way to get this is with a simple analogy. Think about your body's thermostat. It works to keep your temperature right around 37 degrees Celsius, or 98 degrees Fahrenheit. If you get too hot, you sweat. Too cold, you shiver. It's all about balance. Well, your brain does the exact same thing with dopamine. It tries to maintain a stable baseline level. So, when you flood your brain with tons of dopamine, from things like video games or social media, it tries to balance things out by literally getting rid of some of your dopamine receptors. It's a process called downregulation.
And the consequence of this is huge. Your brain just gets used to these super high levels of dopamine, and pretty soon, that becomes your new normal. You basically build up a tolerance, and all of a sudden, you need more and more stimulation just to feel okay, and normal everyday activities start to feel incredibly dull and uninteresting.
This chart just says it all, right? When your dopamine levels are at a normal baseline, your motivation for those important, boring tasks is pretty high. But after you go on a binge of high dopamine activities, your motivation for that same stuff just plummets. Those difficult but necessary tasks simply can't compete anymore.
So that sounds a little bleak, doesn't it? Are we just doomed to be unmotivated forever? Absolutely not. The solution is to intentionally hit the reset button on your dopamine baseline. We have to give our brains a break, let our receptors recover, so that normal life can start to feel motivating and exciting again. And we do this with something called a dopamine detox. The idea is, for one full day, you deliberately cut yourself off from all the usual sources of high stimulation. No phone, no computer, no internet, no music, no junk food. You're basically starving your brain of all that easy pleasure. The real goal here is simple. You have to embrace boredom. That's what gives your dopamine receptors a chance to reset and become more sensitive again.
So why on earth does this work? Well, the principle is actually super simple. You get so bored that boring stuff starts to become fun again. Think about it. If you ate at the world's best restaurant every single night, a simple bowl of plain rice would seem terrible. But if you were starving on a deserted island, that same bowl of rice would be the most incredible meal of your life. The detox does the same thing to your brain. By embracing boredom, you make normal stuff like reading a book or even cleaning your room feel engaging and rewarding again. Look, a one-day reset is incredibly powerful, but it's not the whole game. For real long-term success, we need to go beyond a temporary detox and build a sustainable system for managing our motivation every single day.
And the framework is beautifully simple. First, do the hard work. Get the difficult, low-dopamine stuff done first thing. Second, you track how much time you actually spend on that productive work. And third, you reward yourself with a measured, specific amount of that high-dopamine fun, but, and this is the key, only at the end of the day. This way, dopamine stops being a distraction that pulls you away from your goals and becomes a reward that pulls you toward them.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Here's an example. Let's say for every hour you spend on deep work or exercising or doing chores, you earn yourself 15 minutes of reward time. So if you manage to log 6 productive hours in a day, you've earned 90 minutes of totally guilt-free gaming or social media at the end of the night. It's a clear, simple ratio that puts you back in the driver's seat.
Now I have to add a really important word of caution here. This system is not meant to be an excuse to justify a harmful addiction. If your go-to reward is something that's actually damaging your health or your life, then the goal has to be to find a healthier reward that still gives you that dopamine hit you can look forward to.
And really, it all boils down to this one powerful idea. In a way, we're all dopamine addicts. It's what drives us to do, well, anything. But you have the power to decide where that dopamine comes from. Are you going to get it from mindless distractions that just leave you feeling empty? Or are you going to start linking it to the actual pursuit of your long-term goals? The choice is entirely yours.